Imagine for a second that you're the CEO of a massive manufacturing company. You make steel, chemicals, or cars, the stuff that built the modern world. You're in Germany, the economic engine of Europe, a place known for precision, efficiency, and engineering supremacy. But it's 2023. You walk onto the factory floor and it's quiet. Too quiet. You aren't shut down because you ran out of customers. You aren't shut down because your workers are on strike. You're shut down because you literally cannot afford to turn the lights on. Welcome to the Energiewende, the energy turnaround. It was supposed to be humanity's glorious transition into a utopia of wind, solar, and guilt-free electricity. Germany spent over $500 billion, $500 billion, trying to engineer this green miracle. And what did they get for that mountain of cash? They got the highest electricity prices in the developed world, a deindustrializing economy, and, here is the darkest irony of all, they are currently tearing down wind farms to expand coal mines. Yeah, you heard that right. Today, we are going to dissect the most expensive, unforced error in modern economic history. We're going to look at how a mix of hubris, geopolitical blindness, and panic led a superpower into a trap of its own making. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy, expensive ride. 1. The knee-jerk reaction. How fear killed the atom. To understand how we got to the edge of the cliff, we have to go back to 2010. It feels like a lifetime ago. The iPhone 4 was brand new. People were still doing the Dougie, and in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel, a literal physicist with a PhD in quantum chemistry, actually extended the lifespan of Germany's nuclear power plants. At the time, Germany was sitting pretty. They had a robust mix of nuclear, coal, and renewables. Nuclear provided about 25% of the country's power. It was clean, it was stable, and it was cheap. The plan was sensible. Use nuclear as a bridge while slowly ramping up renewables over decades. But then, on March 11, 2011, the Earth shook in Japan. The Tohoku earthquake triggered a massive tsunami that slammed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. It was a disaster, a tragedy. But it happened 5,000 miles away from Germany, in a seismically active zone, involving a 40-year-old plant design. Germany, for the record, is not known for its massive tsunamis. Logic would dictate a safety review, right? Maybe check your backup generators? But politics isn't about logic, it's about emotion. And the German public was terrified. The anti-nuclear movement in Germany, fueled by the Green Party, Die Grünen, went into overdrive. They had been protesting nuclear energy since the Chernobyl days of the 80s, and this was their I told you so moment. So, what did the physicist chancellor do? Did she look at the data? Did she calculate the baseload requirements for the world's fourth largest economy? No, she panicked. Or rather, she made a calculated political pivot to save her coalition. Days after Fukushima, Merkel announced the Atomausstieg, the nuclear phase-out. Germany would shut down all of its nuclear reactors by 2022. 8 of them were switched off immediately, just click, gone. This is the original sin of the German energy crisis. Let's put this in perspective. Imagine you live in a house with a very reliable, albeit scary-looking furnace. You decide you want to switch to solar panels on the roof. Great idea. But instead of installing the panels first and then turning off the furnace, you smash the furnace with a sledgehammer in the middle of winter and say, "Don't worry, the sun will come out eventually." Germany took 17 trusted, paid-off zero-carbon power plants and decided to throw them in the trash. Why is this a $500 billion mistake? Because simply building wind turbines is expensive, sure. But building wind turbines to replace working nuclear plants is economic suicide. You aren't adding capacity, you're just spending billions to run in place. Between 2010 and 2020, Germany poured massive subsidies into the EEG, Renewable Energy Sources Act. Homeowners and businesses paid a surcharge on every kilowatt-hour to fund this transition. German electricity prices skyrocketed to nearly 3 times the US average. And here is the kicker, the punchline that nobody's laughing at. Despite spending hundreds of billions on renewables, Germany's carbon emissions barely moved for a decade. Why? Because when the wind didn't blow and the sun didn't shine, which happens a lot in Northern Europe, they couldn't turn the nuclear plants back on, so they burned lignite coal, the dirtiest, nastiest fossil fuel on the planet. They killed the cleanest form of baseload power to save the environment, and ended up relying on the sootiest rock in the ground. 2. The Russian needle, addicted to cheap gas. Okay, so you've killed your nuclear plants. You have a lot of wind and solar, but they are intermittent. You need a backup plan for those dark, windless days, what Germans call Dunkelflaut. If you want to get off coal eventually, what's the bridge fuel? Natural gas. It burns cleaner than coal, you can spin the turbines up fast, and it's great for industrial heat, which Germany needs for making chemicals and steel. But Germany doesn't have much gas of its own. Enter the dealer, Vladimir Putin. For decades, Germany operated under a policy called Wandel durch Handel, change through trade. The idea was incredibly optimistic. If we buy enough gas from Russia, if we entangle our economies, Russia will become a nice liberal democracy. We won't go to war with our best customer, right? This led to the construction of Nord Stream 1 and the planning of Nord Stream 2. These were massive pipelines running under the Baltic Sea designed to pump cheap Siberian gas directly into the veins of German industry. It was a drug. And Germany was the junkie. By 2021, Germany was importing 55% of its natural gas from Russia. Their entire manufacturing model, BASF, Bayer, Volkswagen, was predicated on the assumption that cheap Russian gas would flow forever. There were warnings. Oh, there were so many warnings. The Poles warned them. The Ukrainians warned them. The Baltic states screamed from the rooftops that this was a geopolitical trap. They said, "You are handing the Kremlin a kill switch for your economy, and let's not forget the most viral moment of them all." In 2018, at the United Nations, then-President Donald Trump said this: "Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course." The camera cut to the German delegation. They were smirking. They were laughing. They looked at each other like, "Listen to this idiot. He doesn't understand high-level European diplomacy." Fast forward to February 2022. Russian tanks roll into Ukraine. The laughter stopped real quick. Suddenly, the change-through trade policy looked less like sophisticated diplomacy and more like suicidal negligence. When the sanctions hit and Russia throttled the gas flows, and then the pipelines mysteriously blew up, but that's a whole other video, Germany was caught with its pants down in a blizzard. The price of gas didn't just go up, it went vertical. Spot market prices increased by 1,000% at the peak. Remember that factory owner from the beginning of the video? Suddenly his energy bill went from $1 million a month to $10 million. You can't absorb that. You can't pass that on to customers who can just buy steel from China or the US. So, the German government had to scramble. They had to bail out utility giant Uniper to the tune of $30 billion just to keep the lights on. They had to spend hundreds of billions more to subsidize energy bills for citizens to prevent riots. This is where the trap snaps shut. Germany shut down its nuclear, so no backup there. It alienated itself from fossil fuels, ideologically, and then its main supplier of the one fuel it did allow, gas, turned into an enemy of the state. Economic Minister Robert Habeck, from the Green Party ironically, had to go on a humiliating world tour bowing to the Emir of Qatar, begging for LNG, liquefied natural gas, to replace the Russian pipeline gas. And the irony? That LNG is much more expensive than the Russian gas was. It has to be cooled, shipped across the ocean, and regasified. This means the era of cheap German manufacturing is likely gone forever. The competitive advantage that made Made in Germany a global powerhouse, high quality at a competitive price, was secretly subsidized by cheap Russian hydrocarbons. Now that the subsidy is gone, the cracks in the foundation are turning into canyons. We're just getting started. In the next section, we're going to look at the deindustrialization of Europe and why major German companies are packing their bags and moving to Texas. If you want to understand the global economy without the boring jargon, make sure you smash that subscribe button. It helps the algorithm and it helps me afford my own electricity bill. Also, let me know in the comments. Do you think Germany should restart its nuclear plants, or is it too late? I read every comment. 3. The deindustrialization disaster, goodbye, made in Germany. If you want to see the real cost of this energy trap, you don't look at a utility bill, you look at Ludwigshafen. This is the home of BASF, the largest chemical producer in the world. This one site consumes about as much natural gas as all of Switzerland. For decades, this was the beating heart of German industry, turning cheap Russian gas into the fertilizers, plastics, and vitamins that the world buys. But in 2023, the heart started skipping beats. BASF announced it was permanently downsizing in Europe. They cut 2,600 jobs at their flagship plant. They shut down one of their ammonia plants. And where are they moving that investment? China. BASF is building a $10 billion state-of-the-art complex in Zhenjiang, China. Why? Because in China the energy is cheap and the government isn't trying to guilt-trip you for using it. And they aren't alone. It's a mass exodus. Miele, the company that makes those invincible washing machines, announced they are moving production to Poland. Volkswagen is openly discussing building its next battery factories in Canada and the US, chasing the juicy subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act. Economists have a polite term for this: structural change. I have a more accurate term: deindustrialization. Think about what this means. Germany is an export economy. It doesn't have Facebook or Google. It has things you can touch. It makes stuff. If you take away the ability to make stuff competitively, what is left? A really nice museum with good beer. The CEO of BASF, Martin Brudermüller, didn't mince words. He said Europe is becoming increasingly uncompetitive. That CEO speak for "we are leaving before the ship sinks." This isn't just about rich shareholders losing money. This is about the high-paying, middle-class union jobs that hold a society together. When the steel mills close, they don't come back. When the chemical plants move to China, they stay in China. Germany is literally hollowing itself out to meet carbon targets that the rest of the world is ignoring. It's like setting your own house on fire to show the neighbors how serious you are about fire safety. 4. The grid bottleneck. The $4 billion ghost electricity scandal. Okay, let's get technical for a minute, because this is where the incompetence truly shines. Germany has a geography problem. The wind blows in the north, where the ocean is. The factories are in the south, where BMW and Siemens are. To get the power from A to B, you need massive high-voltage transmission lines. The biggest one is called SuedLink. It was supposed to be the main artery of the energy transition. The original plan? Have it ready by 2022, just in time for the nuclear phase-out. The reality? It's stuck in bureaucratic hell. Due to endless lawsuits and NIMBY, not-in-my-backyard protests, they had to agree to bury the cables underground, which tripled the cost and delayed the project. The new completion date? 2028. Maybe. So, what happens today when a storm hits the North Sea and the wind turbines spin like crazy? You have too much power in the north and no way to send it south. The grid gets overloaded. To prevent a blackout, the grid operators have to tell the wind farms to turn off. But here is the kicker. The wind farms still get paid. It's called redispatch, or as I call it, ghost electricity. German consumers are paying wind farms billions of euros not to produce power. In 2022 alone, the cost of this congestion management hit a record $4.2 billion. Let that sink in. You're paying for wind turbines to sit idle in the north. Meanwhile, because that power can't reach the south, the factories in Bavaria have to fire up, you guessed it, coal and gas plants to keep running. You're paying twice. Once for the green energy you didn't get, and once for the dirty energy you had to use instead. It is a Rube Goldberg machine of inefficiency. And who pays for it? The German grandma checking her mailbox, finding an electricity bill that has doubled in 3 years. We're halfway through the disaster. In the next part, we're going to talk about the heat pump fiasco that nearly toppled the government, and the green reality check that shows why emissions are actually dropping. Spoiler, it's not good news. If you're enjoying this breakdown of economic chaos, hit that like button. It tells YouTube that people actually care about energy policy. And tell me in the comments, would you install a heat pump if the government forced you to pay $30,000 for it? 5. The Heat Pump Rebellion. How to lose an election in one easy step. By 2023, the German government realized that shutting down nuclear and burning coal wasn't exactly great for their carbon footprint. They needed a new win. They needed to decarbonize your basement. Enter the Heizungsgesetz, the heating law. The Green Party economic minister, Robert Habeck, pushed through a law that effectively banned new oil and gas boilers starting in 2024. The replacement? Heat pumps. Now, don't get me wrong. Heat pumps are amazing technology. They are basically air conditioners running in reverse. They are super efficient. But there is a catch. They work best in modern, well-insulated houses with underfloor heating. Do you know what most German houses are? Old, drafty, built with bricks thick enough to stop a tank but terrible at holding heat. To make a heat pump work in a 1950s German house, you often need to rip up the floors, replace the radiators, and insulate the walls. The cost? It can easily run between $20,000 and $50,000. The government offered subsidies, sure, but the messaging was a disaster. It felt like a forced expropriation. Grandma Erna, living on a pension in her paid-off house, was suddenly told she might have to take out a loan just to stay warm next winter. The public reaction wasn't just anger, it was fury. The tabloid newspaper Bild ran headlines calling it the heat hammer. Habeck's approval ratings fell off a cliff. The far-right party, AfD, Alternative for Germany, surged in the polls, largely by saying, "We won't touch your boiler." It got so bad that the government nearly collapsed. They had to water down the law significantly, delaying the deadlines and creating massive loopholes. But the damage was done. The heat pump industry, which had ramped up production expecting a boom, actually saw sales crash in 2024 because everyone was confused and terrified. They panicked and bought brand new gas boilers before the ban kicked in, locking in fossil fuel usage for another 20 years. It was a masterclass in how not to do policy. Instead of incentivizing the transition, they tried to mandate it overnight, ignoring the economic reality of their own citizens. 6. The green mirage, success by failure. Now the German government will look at you and say, "But wait, our emissions are dropping, we hit our 2023 climate targets," and technically they are right. In 2023, Germany's CO2 emissions dropped to the lowest level in 70 years. But why did they drop? Was it because of the amazing wind turbines? Was it the heat pumps? No. It was because the factories stopped running. Energy-intensive production fell by nearly 20%. When you shut down steel mills, chemical plants, and paper factories, your emissions go down. Hooray! You saved the planet by destroying your economy. This is the equivalent of losing weight by cutting off your leg. Yes, the scale says you are lighter, but you're also bleeding out on the bathroom floor. The head of Germany's audit office explicitly called this out. He said Germany is not on track for a sustainable transition. It is on track for an economic contraction that masquerades as climate success, and it gets worse. Because Germany shut down its nuclear plants, its electricity grid is now dirtier than its neighbor France. France gets 70% of its power from nuclear. Their carbon intensity is around 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt. Germany? Even on a good day, it hovers around 300 grams to 400 grams. So, when a German buys an electric car to save the planet, they're charging it with electricity that is 6 to 8 times dirtier than the electricity a French person uses. The green energy leader of Europe is actually one of the biggest polluters, simply because they refuse to accept that nuclear energy is zero carbon. 7. The 2025 reality check. Where are we now? So here we are. It's late 2025. The German economy is stagnating. It was the only major G7 economy to shrink in 2023, and it barely moved in 2024. The German model, cheap energy in, high quality exports out, is broken. The political landscape is fractured. The Green Party is fighting for its political life. The industries that made Germany rich are looking for exit strategies, and the world is watching. Developing nations like India and Vietnam are looking at Germany and saying, "Yeah, we're not doing that." They are building coal, they are building nuclear, they are prioritizing reliability and affordability over ideology. Germany wanted to be a role model, and they succeeded. They became the perfect example of what not to do. They showed the world that you cannot run a modern industrial economy on intermittent weather-dependent energy alone, at least not without a massive reliable baseload backup. And if you destroy your clean backup, nuclear, before your new backup, batteries or hydrogen, is ready, you fall off the bridge. 8. Final thoughts. The moral of the story. Is there a way out? Maybe. Germany still has incredible engineers. They have deep pockets. There is talk of restarting some nuclear plants, though the technical hurdles are massive now. There is hope that hydrogen will eventually save the day. But the lesson for the rest of us is clear. Energy policy cannot be built on wishful thinking. It requires physics, math, and cold, hard economics. If you let ideology drive the bus, don't be surprised when you drive it off a cliff. Germany spent $500 billion to learn this lesson. Hopefully the rest of us can learn it for free. Thanks for watching. If you found this deep dive valuable, please check out our upcoming video where I break down why France is winning the energy war. It's the perfect sequel to this disaster story.